Greetings, this is I, Dracovin, Dracovin, your Lord and Emperor here at the Dracovin Empire, and welcome! We're continuing our discussion on things from the Pathfinder role-playing game system's world of Golarion. And today, I've got another planar scion from you. Yes, a planar scion, which I've talked about in the past. If you saw any of my Geniekin videos, they're all planar scions. And I really should define planar scions more. I just went for the Geniekins, but we'll do that today! We'll talk more about the generalist information on some planar scions as we kind of establish things, as I'm taking a step back from Geniekin and talking about everybody else that's got planar influence. I've talked about a few already, Cambions and Amphirians, who were Tieflings, Aasimar, respectively, but there's plenty of others to talk about. Plenty of others. And today we're going to be talking, of course, about Duskwalkers. Anyway, as I'd like to start, I don't know if I did the little hand movement. I don't think I really did. As I'd like to start out, I'd like to mention a bunch of books, and then we'll go over some basics and stuff like that. But if you want to look up information on Duskwalkers, I'd recommend the Ancestry Guide. That's a really good place to start out with. Give you some basic information on them. The original Pathfinder 2nd edition Bestiary has some information on them in general, and the Planar Adventures book. All this is 2nd edition. That's where we kind of get our basis of Duskwalkers kind of introduced more than anything. So, shall we define a little bit more of planar scions and move down the list from that into Duskwalkers? Because I really should. I talked about Geniekins as a group, and Geniekins are a type of planar scion. I think I mentioned that in my original overarching Geniekin video. Today, Duskwalkers are part of a group called Urobians. Now, Urobians are a smaller group, and they have connections to monitors, which are types of outsiders. If we're talking monitors, it's those that are associated with planes that are neutral in respects to good and evil. So keep that in mind. So they're like just the neutral planes. That's where this is connected to. Those that are kind of in the middle ground. So we're not talking about evil or good at all. None of that. And there are more others than just the Duskwalkers. They're just one of them. And they are the ones that are... I mean, we're talking about it today. You know. But that is a smaller group in the overall group of planar scions. Planar scions, there isn't really enough to talk in their own videos. So, you know, we're talking about it now. Planar energies, magic, divine intervention, all these things can cause planar scions to come exist. In the case of Duskwalkers, which we're going to talk about right now, and I'm showing off one now, it is in fact the influence of deities. Because it's the psychopomps which give basically second life to these beings. A Duskwalker is connected to the Boneyard. The Boneyard being where all the souls of the dead pass through before they go into their afterlife. It's where the deity of death, Pharasma, judges everyone and sends them to their respective afterlives. Psychopomps are basically the servants of Pharasma, the outsider servants that serve Pharasma, the Lady of Graves. So, they reincarnate from the souls given a second life by psychopomps. So, there is a kind of divine reason, I guess, in a way, for Duskwalkers to exist. It's just one of those things that is kind of hard to determine because it's the work of things that are related directly to death. A Duskwalker physically have a resemblance to whatever ancestry they were in a previous life, except their ashen gray skin. So if you were human, you're going to look human. If you were elf, you're going to look elf. That kind of thing. Most of them do tend towards humans, but there are other humanoid ones, and there are bigger, smaller ones, depending on your... whatever your ancestry was. So you have this kind of shadow, like, not a shadow, but like a resemblance to what you were before, but you're something different, too. And that, honestly, ashen gray skin stands you out a lot. So, a lot of Duskwalkers are going to have an innate respect for the cycle of birth and death, and relate to jobs that are like protections of that. Undead hunters, midwives, morticians, priests. They appreciate that their death allowed them to have the new life they have now. and they begin to struggle to understand why others may fear death. And those that are more cheerful might even go towards morbid humor. And there is some anti-Duskwalker prejudice. They are beings that are the dead. Now, they're not undead because they're reincarnated souls into these new bodies. They are living beings. And, you know, there still is that mindset of something different, alien, connected to death. Many of them do tend to be companionable, open-minded, accepting. They'll seek romances and relationships with friendships with other various species, and many will have families consisting of adopted children, preferring to adopt those that their parents might look over. If a Duskwalker becomes an adventurer, because there is sometimes a misplaced sense of destiny. Again, there is that connection with the divine and, you know, why the psychopomps gave them a second chance, which there could be any reason, so maybe there is a destiny, maybe there isn't. You know, and yeah, a Duskwalker technically has free will. But, because they are given a second life, they're given a reincarnation, there is this pressure to make good use of it. Many choose to study magic, become wizards and bards. Those that are concerned with the matters of the soul might become clerics, champions, or monks. And the first Duskwalker is known. It was a result of a bargain between an Eltharian mother and Yarmaja. And this was prior to Aaron's death, of course. And Yarmaja are the highest order of psychopomps. They're the final judges, the grave magistrates, the dragons who eat men's souls. They look like a cross between a black dragon and a crow. And they're the law lords of the Boneyard. Their rules are the rules of the Boneyard. So it was, you know, this one figure making a deal there. An Eltharian mother is another psychopomp. So it was a bargain between two psychopomps that created them. And the Eltharius mother is basically because Eltharius are capable of having children. It is very, very rare for them to be able to become pregnant with a child. And most likely their children are just going to be ordinary ones. So, was that deal the child of this mother, the first Duskwalker, to allow their child to have a soul, to reincarnate it? And there's like legends and stuff behind that you can kind of look into. So, before Eridan's death, though, the souls destined to perform roles that would serve the Boneyard's instance would be reincarnated as Duskwalkers. And as the Age of Lost Omens began and prophecy failed, Duskwalkers began to shape their own fates. So originally, like, there was this interest of the Boneyard in reincarnating as individuals with roles that they felt like they would be destined to perform. But because destiny has failed in the Age of Lost Omens, it means that it is an attempt now for the Boneyard to create beings that will do that. But Duskwalkers can make their own choices now. They're not driven specifically by that destiny they've been reincarnated for. An interesting factor in the new world post-Eridan's death. So yes, maybe those early Duskwalkers were connected to divine fate. Now, there's that hint of divine fate that exists within there. But you do have a choice whether you can follow it or not. Kind of an interesting little, like, switch around there with Duskwalkers. Something I like about them. So Duskwalkers are taken from souls who did help preserve the cycles of souls before they died, that fate had decreed to them. There is a limit on the number of Duskwalkers that can exist at one time. If it is reached, dead Duskwalkers cannot be resurrected. Some Duskwalkers do request their funerals also celebrate the birth of a new Duskwalker, which usually takes place a year after their previous one's death. A new Duskwalker will appear spontaneously in a sanctified plane with a connection to death, near a settlement as a rough 8-year-old human child, cloaked in simple white robes, with a small satchel of food and water by their sides. Duskwalkers, as children, do not experience infancy, and mature at a variable rate, like the humanoids they are a reincarnation of. But most mature tend to be at a rate similar to humans, or close enough to them, and have that healthy balance between life and death interests. But that's, again, depends on the situation they're in. If they're fending for themselves a lot more, they're going to mature a lot more rapidly than those that actually have a place that they're taken into. And a good important thing to note is all Duskwalkers are sterile, and most are asexual as well. Not all of them, though, but many of them, it tends to be a thing that because they are a sterile species, they tend to be asexual. Again, because they are a shadow of a people doesn't mean they don't have a identity of them as a gender. It's just they don't have that connection. Some Duskwalkers will receive visitations or messages from psychopomps. But, again, because of the change in destiny, they are not obligated to take tasks from those psychopomps. There used to be an obligation, but there isn't now. Another thing that is a Duskwalker can strike true to spectral beings with any weapon in their hand. And their ward against corruption protects them from negative energy and the supernatural abilities of undead and Salkis. It also does prevent them from becoming evil, from becoming undead. There are evil Duskwalkers that reject their nature and associate with Sakaris. They lose their ability and gain powers suited for inflicting fear. Their altered ward against corruption allows them to become undead and guarantees some form of unusual form of undead, like ghosts that are unbound to their place of death. So, again, because those destinies have been shattered, you do have Duskwalkers that make choices that are very different than they would. So, Duskwalkers are very rare. Many go their entire lives without meeting another of their own kind. The few communities that do form are small, and unite individuals with a common goal, like bands of undead hunters and the like. Most of them live among the communities near where they manifested. Humans do tend, because again, humans are tends to be the ones they mostly end up with anyway. Again, humans most common. But whoever it is, whatever community they end up with, the ashen appearance, their manner of their creation, and how they relate to death can be unsettling. Certain communities can value that. Their skill at medicine, their proficiency fighting undead. It depends on where they end up. And they can get along with Inferians, Campions, Alphavites, Gonzai, but they do distrust Dampiers. Again, that natural connection to undead and their anti-undead nature almost in a little bit. And interestingly enough, though most Duskwalkers don't fall in the lines that they could be defined as more good and evil, good ones are less common than those evil ones. That tendance towards neutrality and balance, especially between life and death, means that it's a lot easier to fall towards that death end of things than the birth and life end, maybe. Pharasma is a popular deity, but also Sarenrae and Shava. And again, they vary in the language they take. They name themselves soon after they manifest. And a lot of them will, if they're in good relationship with the community, they'll name themselves according to community traditions of where they are. But if they're ostracized, they'll make their own names. And most of them will either speak Chthonian, Diabolic, Inferian, or Necral as a language. There you go. That's Duskwalkers. A simple little jaunt, not something we went super deep into, but there isn't a lot. It's a second edition ancestry that's been introduced. But it gives us an idea of planar science as more as a whole. as I said in the past, earlier on the video, if you haven't watched it, there are earlier videos than this one, I did talk about Geniekin and went through all of them. They are a group of planar scions, but they represent a little bit more of those natural inner energies. Now we are talking about planar scions that represent something a little different, something a little bit more alien, and in this case, death, the boneyard. And the interesting juxtaposition is that Duskwalkers are still created. The original deal to create Duskwalkers between two psychopaths, one that could have children, and one that lords over the psychopaths, the servants of death, of Pharasma, still holds. That limited number is still limited. Doesn't mean the deal couldn't be changed. That could be a storyline you could do. Maybe more Duskwalkers, something interesting there for a storyline. But the essence of what they are is these things that are not really dead. They're alive. They're very alive. They're reincarnation. There's the reincarnation spell, which does work, to reincarnate a soul in a new body. But as a reincarnation, they're just a little different. They perhaps understand their being, but unlike something with a reincarnation spell where you probably have all your memories intact, as Duskwalker, it's not the same thing. You understand where you are, where you've come from. But do you have those memories? I don't know. Honestly speaking, from discussing Duskwalkers in general, I would say you don't really have all that. Maybe you have some of that memory left. Flashes of it, something or other. But you are beyond that. The psychopaths chose your soul because it had an opportunity to do something for them. But with the change in destiny, you don't have to do that. Maybe you want to follow your destiny laid out from you by the Boneyard, by the servants of Pharasma. The reason why you were reincarnated, why your soul was reincarnated, while maybe you have a slight connection to that past. But maybe you don't. You have a new path to go on, a new presence, a new destiny that you're going to form on your own. And that's interesting, because there's this interesting idea of destiny and reincarnation that exists within the Duskwalker way, and the fact that they are something touched by the realm of death, the Boneyard. Their abilities reflect that. What does that touch do? What does this existence do? Because you don't have a childhood. You're born into existence as someone of, as I said, roughly an 8-year-old human child in size. And you aren't really the ancestor you were before either. You're something new. Yes, you're connected with whatever you were, maybe size, body shape in general, but you're just something a little bit more different, alien, but not dead, no matter what other thing people think. Anyway, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed learning about Duskwalkers and Later Worm. They are an interesting planar scion, and I will kind of break down more planar scion groups. I've talked about a bunch of them before. I'll try to finish up the rest of the planar scions and videos in the future if you want to check those out, as we've gone through all the Geniekins, just to kind of give those interesting, versatile heritages a call. If you want to see more of my stuff, if you're seeing the tabletop stuff, I did forget to shout out at the beginning of the video. I forgot that my YouTube and Twitch side. Hey, Twitch. Hey, YouTube. Twitch, a follow would be nice. YouTube, always good for liking, ringing the bell, subscribing. And then the comment of today is, anybody play Duskwalkers? Hey, that's my question right now. If you want to see other tabletop stuff that I stream on Twitch, put up on YouTube later on, Tuesdays, Thursdays, Saturdays are my 3 main tabletop-related days that I stream stuff. Tuesdays, Thursdays, usually between 1 and 2. It's been a little later in the afternoons as of late because of life stuff, but, you know, as of when this is being recorded. But that's usually the normal time I try to aim to, depending on that, sometimes earlier too. Saturdays around 11. Again, varies from life stuff, but that's a little bit closer on that one. Wednesdays, Crimson Queen, live play of Pathfinder 1st Edition at 9 p.m. EST in the evening, all EST time periods. Saturdays at 6 p.m. discussing tabletop. Most weeks, me and my friends talk about tabletop news of the week and deeper discussions on tabletop. Of course, I stream some games over on Twitch, and all this stuff ends up over on YouTube, so you can always check out all the rest of my stuff on YouTube, or you can join me live. Either choice. I don't mind it. Anyway, I'm going to get going. Oh, and Discord and Twitter.com stuff, link below for social media. Thank you all for joining. I hope you enjoyed learning about the Duskwalkers. And we'll do more Planar Scions, more Ancestries, more interesting things to play and know about, and beings that live within the Golarion cosmology. But until that next time, I bid all of you out there a deep and wonderful farewell.